Excellent. All right, good evening. I would like to call the Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can we all please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I don't have anything under announcements this evening. Is there anyone here for anything that is not currently printed on our agenda? Seeing as none, I will move right into our first agenda item. Superintendent of Schools Paul Vieira, presentation of the 2022 graduating class student accomplishments. How are you, Paul?
Great, thank you. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for having me here tonight to be able to speak about our graduates and the work that they did. We're going to talk about statistics, give you some information and some numbers, but I just want to point out that these numbers represent students. They represent individuals. They represent stories. They represent a pre-K to 12 journey that each of these students got to graduation. We all know that for a student to graduate takes a lot of work from moms, from dads, from caregivers, from grandparents, from the school committee, through Board of Selectmen, through teachers, through secretaries, bus drivers. So I just want to thank them for all that they've done for our graduates as they got to this point. So the class of 2022 had 86 graduates and one student get a certificate of attendance. Out of our 86 graduates, we had 57% attend four-year colleges, and we had 11% attend two-year colleges. Out of those 58 attending a 2 or 4-year school, 36 attended public colleges and 22 attended private colleges. Interestingly enough, 41 of the kids going off to school are staying in-state. Our kids go to school, but they like to stay in-state. 17 out-of-state students. Out of the 17 out-of-state, only 6 are out of New England, though. So we have 6 kids going out of New England to the University of San Diego, Siena, University of Northwest Iowa, Southwest Baptist, and University of Tampa. So kids are going off to school, but they're staying local. We have 8 students going to Quinsig, 3 going to URI, 3 going to Worcester State, 11 attending the UMass colleges, and 1 going to Ivy League, Harvard. Just important to note, though, that these are where the students are attending. Doesn't necessarily mean it's where they got into. As we know, those of us who have kids, the cost of tuition is just incredible for some of these schools. So a lot of families are faced with, do you go to school X for $60,000, or do you go to a Worcester State for $15,000? And when you're looking at taking loans, big difference coming out of college after 4 years with $250,000 in loans for $60,000 in loans. We have 5 of our graduates attending trade school. In total, 73% of our graduates are attending some form of higher education, which is right at the state average. 21% are doing the workforce, and 2 are taking gap years. We just got back our AP scores. We had 64 juniors and seniors take 147 AP tests in 13 different subjects. A little less than half of our juniors and seniors are taking an AP test. This year we had some great scores in AP Lit, Government, and Calculus. Next year we're adding 2 new AP classes. We're adding AP Physics 2 and AP Seminar. We had 19 students who were recognized as AP Scholars, which means they took 3 AP exams and had a 3 or higher on the scores. We had 1 AP Scholar with honors, which means they took a score of 3 or higher on 4 or more tests with an average score of 3.25. And then we had 4 AP Scholars with distinction. These are kids who took 5 AP exams with an average score of 3.5. So a little less than half of our kids were recognized for their excellence in taking the AP exams. One thing that Mr. Romano started, Dr. Romano now started a few years ago, is a pathway project. These are different pathways kids can take in high school, kind of like a mini college major, in which they take classes, complete internships, do senior projects, and participate in extracurricular activities. This year we had 6 pathways: global competency, STEM, business, criminal justice, history, and art. and we're adding 3 more for next year: culinary, health sciences, and child development. So we're really excited about the Pathways program. This year, we had 12 members of the class of 2022 could earn a pathway distinction for their completion of those pathways. COVID, unfortunately, put a damper on some of our internships programs, but we did have students this year do internships with the police department, dog orphans, in gear, and with Rep. McGovern's office and within the public schools. And we also had some juniors participate in a shadow day. In June, we recognize our students on class night, where the community and various organizations donated over $53,000 to our seniors, which was awesome to see that event. We had other awards. We had Society of Women and Engineers. We had Adams Scholarship. We had Brandeis Book Scholarship Awards. We had kids receiving various awards. And then, Dr. Romano wanted us to point out that in the past 3 or 4 years, here are just some of the programs that we've added for our students. We've added a robotics, 2 different levels of courses for kids. We've had a biomedical class. We've added zoology and marine biology, an introduction to engineering course, AP computer science, criminal justice and forensics. We've revised our business program, and we're participating in the Blackstone Valley Consortium with area schools in welding, computer science, and manufacturing. So it's great to see our kids going off to all these schools. It's great to see them having academic success, but it's also great to see that we've come together as a community to support them, because they can't do it alone. It's with the help of teachers, the parents, their caregivers, and the entire community that they've been this successful. So really happy and pleased to present that to you. More than happy to answer questions.
Did you have any kids go into the armed services out of this year's class?
I don't think so, from what Dr. Romano said here. 21 are entering the workforce and 2 are taking gap years. Doesn't look like we had any do the service this year.
Overall, how do the numbers compare with last year? I mean,
Pretty consistent, right at that 75% with kids.
Yeah.
Last year was tricky because of the pandemic and we started remote, but the numbers that we have this year are consistent where they've been in previous years. Great always to see a kid attending and getting into an Ivy, which is awesome. We had Harvard this year, Princeton last year, which is awesome.
It is. I don't envy their tuition payment, though, for Harvard.
Correct.
you get a scholarship, hopefully.
I would imagine so.
Neat
They're-
blind school, so you never know.
Are they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any information on kids that went to the BBT?
We tried, Mr. Romano tried reaching out, and he was unable to get the information for a lot of our BVT students. BVT, roughly anywhere from 20 to 30% of our 8th graders are going over there. So although they were with us for grades pre-K or K through 8, and we were with them in their formative years, a lot of our kids who do go to BVT have a lot of success. We just don't have that. I wasn't able to get that data.
So do you think long-term, like the addition of some of these programs coming into the high school may actually slow down some of the BVT transition?
That's the hope. It's a lot of, we need to do a better job catching kids and informing parents earlier on, and waiting to the 8th grade to talk about what's happening at the high school isn't the right time. What I've started hearing a lot this year, heard a little bit last year, is parents already in the 5th or 6th grade are talking about when our kids go to BVT, when our kids go to BVT, what's the application process in BVT, and they're starting that conversation in the 5th or 6th grade, which means we need to start promoting the high school in the 5th and 6th grade. One thing that the primary school and the elementary school did this year is they did a collaborative project once a month between 1st grade students and 5th grade students, where they got together. I'm going to ask the high school and the middle school to do a similar project with high school kids and middle school kids once a month, so we can start building those connections between high school kids, programs, and teachers, and middle school. I'm also going to ask the high school principal to come down once a month and meet with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students and teachers, just to start sharing information about what's going on, and then do that outreach to families. I think the pathways, the Project Lead the Way that we've done in engineering, we're starting that in the middle school and at the high school next year. I think that engineering pathway might help keep some kids here and going to BVT. We can't compete with plumbing, with electrical. We just don't offer those programs. But for some of the academic programs, we're hoping that Project Lead the Way will help keep kids here. Project Lead the Way offers 3 different pathways. It has an engineering pathway, has a biomedical pathway, and has a computer science pathway. They're expensive. They cost money, but we've done the training in middle school and high school for engineering, and we're going to see how that takes off. and then hopefully we can add to that in upcoming years.
That's all my
Good base, build up even better next year.
Absolutely.
Good accomplishment. I was the one that suggested that you come in because I was impressed with the accomplishments you had during the awards night and the graduation process. So that's what prompted this.
Yeah, great to be here. And it's always awesome to talk about students and how they're succeeding in what they're doing. And again, seniors, high school gets a lot of the accolades, but remember, the foundation starts at the primary, pre-K, K1, 2. That's when they learn to read, that's when they learn to write. Those are the formative years, so try not to forget about what happened at the primary, the elementary, and the middle, because it is that continuum that gets them to high school and to this point, but it takes a village.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. All right.
Thank you, Paul.
You want to see the minutes?
Yes.
Thank you, have a good night. Thank you. Enjoy.
Enjoy your night.
You as well.
All right. So the second item on the agenda is the Conservation Committee appointment of Joseph Fitzpatrick and possible votes.
I'm going to recuse myself during this process.
Good evening.
How you doing?
There he is.
What's going on, Al?
How we doing?
Good.
Good. You're his brother? I'm sorry.
Did you beat on him when you were younger?
I don't want to divulge.
Joe served with me on the zoning board. I learned a lot from him. He was at least in more knowledgeable in some ways of the zoning bylaws than I was, so like,
Excellent.
he has that background.
And you were originally looking at planning and then moved over to conservation, right?
Well, the town, they said they'd rather me have one over there, so I said, fine, whatever.
And conservation's already met with you and,
Yeah, they approved the, July 18th, they had their meeting and they voted, all members voted to recommend Mr. Fitzpatrick to you guys for appointment.
okay. And you're a building inspector?
That's right. Building inspector in town of Attleboro and building commissioner in Millville.
Not a lot going on in Millville.
We
is
get
there?
another,
I get it at, take care of that at night and stuff like that. But, yeah, they're coming along, they're doing quite a bit. There's quite a bit of stuff happening, be surprised.
Well, so if you blink, you've gone through Millville.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not like Attleboro. Attleboro, you better pack a lunch.
Yeah, you're going to be there, I bet.
Yeah.
Absent a really hard question, I'd make a motion that we appoint Mr. Fitzpatrick to the Conservation Committee for a 3-year term.
second?
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All set.
Sorry to put you through the ringer, but
That's right.
government.
Thank you very much.
You handled that well.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. Mike back now.
His brother's probably beating him up out in the hall. That's what I would do.
Who's your brother?
Should I just move along?
Okay.
We're just getting ready to send a search party for you.
Try to get them a piece of candy.
Thank you.
You got something on you? All right,
Hey,
good.
well.
No, I'm good. I have my little strawberry ones. Okay, next agenda item is Gregory's Restaurant and Pizza sign review and possible votes.
Hi, how are you guys?
Did you bring pizza?
We had some.
Last time I offered you refused, guys, come on.
All right, so on the October 5th Board of Selectmen meeting, it was voted to approve a sign waiver for Gregory's, subject to review after install of the sign, and readdress the time length of the message intervals. Town council has provided a sign release and indemnity form for the business manager to sign and have notarized. I'm assuming that's in here, right?
No.
There is a copy. Sharon wants.
Excellent.
Something about signing your life away from the beginning until the end of time.
Yes.
And
It says-
anything thereafter.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can
I
read it.
thought that was a little,
Don't sign it, just.
Yeah.
and at least 2 pizzas delivered to every selectmen's meeting.
Yeah, the only thing, when this came in, this said should, and how, these changes requires. And it said it should.
oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so.
Just catch
One
up.
That
cor-
was the only.
That was the one correction.
Which
that
was
helped.
the,
On that line there where it said should instead of requires.
yeah.
Absent another question.
Yeah.
Do you like your sign? How's it working out?
I love it.
You do?
What about you guys?
Yeah.
Nobody's complaining.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm still mad about no pizza. You
Yeah.
haven't
Oh
gotten
my
past that yet.
God. All right, just give me 5 minutes.
Everybody but me, because I voted against it.
No slice for him.
No pizza
No
for
slice,
you.
no
No
pizza
slice
for you. All right. He's the one complained last time, you know, it's like, I should, but you know what? I respect that.
I just have somebody else going to get my chicken salad wrong.
There you go.
He's afraid to come to the store, right?
Well, you don't want to get turned away right at the counter. I feel like you. If you drive by and notice, it says Mike Fitzpatrick, don't come in on the sign.
Well, it blinks,
Flashes by quick.
and like every 10th message comes up, it says that. It's real fast, so nobody really notices it.
Subliminal.
Yeah.
I think it's a nice addition
Yeah.
to the town, Main Street. Pending the release, town responsibility or.
Yeah, that's the only thing that was actually holding up his building permit was this release. So now that we finally got no fault of his, but we finally got that, so once he signs that, then Ken's gonna process his building permit form.
Okay. You have any issues with the release form at all? No.
I'm just came to sign, that's it.
Yeah.
Do you have to first? or-
No, oh, he's gonna do it.
I think
Yeah, we'd already
Sign it.
voted and passed the
Yep.
sign, so.
And I'll notarize it.
Do we need another
He
vote?
just
Just a
he
signature.
reviewed them,
Yep.
so there's no
Maybe
issue.
on some sort of probation.
And then
Yeah, it was a 60-day review.
I'll give you a copy
Make a
once I
motion that we
notarize it.
acknowledge the 60-day review and move forward. Sign as is.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
If I say aye, do I get redeemed at Gregory's?
It's up to him.
Oh, all right.
You're allowed to enter the establishment.
you're gonna have a slice, she's free.
Forgiveness is divine, you know, with karma points.
He can have a slice of pizza, no cheese on it.
No. Okay.
I tried to get one, he wouldn't make one today, right?
What, with no
He's
cheese?
trying the tomato pie.
Then the whole sign is now is because of the pizza?
So
I'll get him a copy.
you'll notarize that
Yep.
and forward it to you?
Yep.
All right,
Good to go,
all
bud.
set?
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for
Did we
helping.
vote too?
Thank you.
Just a second.
You're off.
Voted, actually?
Yeah, we voted.
okay.
We're all set.
Okay.
All right, so it's BFCC school appointment of Shirley Mazinski, move to open seat of BOS appointment and possible votes.
Was she appointed by another entity? entity that,
Her appointment is a school appointment.
yeah,
They were notified a month prior to the end of the fiscal year. They were a little late with getting her the notification for a meeting, and I think they're meeting this week.
I think it's on the 10th.
Yeah, or next week,
On
I'm
the-
sorry.
On the 10th, so.
oh, so, I mean, I don't have a
I think it was
problem.
discussed of moving her to a BOS appointment instead of
Yeah.
a school appointment. They could have somebody.
It was a little more urgent, just to keep continuity through the BFCC,
Yeah.
to assist him in all the projects that he has going through there.
Make a motion that we approve Shirley Brzezinski as the Board of Selectmen appointment to the BFCC.
Second,
Is there a term on that?
lifetime. No, 3 years, I
It's
think.
3.
I teased her and told
3
her that I
years.
would get her a lifetime
For a
appointment.
period of 3 years.
So technically, she's vice Virginia Howe. Is she taking that seat that just expired?
Yes,
So then she gets the full term, the 3-year term?
Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
And then the school at some point, like,
The school, I think, has 2 seats that they can do, so you have a new school committee, and they just need to come up to speed as to what the role of the BFCC is.
I think the school has 1. The moderator has the other
Okay,
2.
okay. But the school committee just needs to come up to speed as to what the role of the BFCC is, so in light of that, that's what the recommendation was, we're over to our appointment.
Well, she's certainly experienced and been in a lot of positions in the town.
What's that?
So I have a motion, anybody get a second?
Second.
Yes. Yes, that's the current version.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so we have Darkstream LLC host community amendment and possible votes.
Mr. Chairman, I think they might be waiting on someone still.
Good evening, everyone. How you doing?
Oh,
We are waiting on Dan Glisman. He apparently thought the meeting was at 7:30, so he's en route. We're expecting him in about 15 minutes.
Okay,
Is it
cool.
possible to maybe
Yeah, we'll
put us
just,
to the end of the list?
yeah, we'll put a hold on it and we'll
Till
come
he
back
comes
to it.
in.
How's that?
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Not a problem. Okay. Review and sign state primary warrant for town clerk and possible votes.
Make a motion that we approve the state primary warrant for the September 6th, 2022 party primary.
Second.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? The thing I find funny is notify and warn. You have to warn people there's an election coming. It says that on the warrant.
Not people.
Is that 9/22? Is that what you said?
September 6th.
September 6th, 2022.
Yes. All right, seeing as there's no further discussion on it, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We'll have to sign that tonight.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
in the office.
And we have the open meeting law legislative update and possible votes.
So, Mr. Chairman, the legislature has taken some action here, and the governor has signed, extending the existing pandemic-related relief through December 15th, 2023. So that's the Senate action. The House action was April. I actually think the governor has signed the final bill at this point. But I guess the point here is that the state action preempts any need for the local Board of Selectmen to make any decision on the matter until it expires. So the regime has been kept status quo, which is that each individual board makes its own decision to continue, and I think almost all of them will continue using Zoom for both members and those appearing before boards and committees. So
This ratifies what we're doing anyway, basically.
Well, pretty much, you guys extended it, I believe, through, was it 60 days?
We were going
30
to do a
days?
90-day review.
90-day
Would have
review.
brought you to the beginning of October, but this came out last week or the week before, so
Right.
just get it.
So there's really no action
You
needed for
can
us.
skip over it. I guess the notice to our boards and committees is that they may continue to have remote participation.
Do we have
Governor
to,
says
do we
that.
have to extend, or take a vote at some point to extend it? Now it's automatically
So
extended?
when the state does this, they preempt you and you
Yeah.
don't really have to do it.
Okay. So it's-
I like those.
Those are easy.
All right.
softballs.
ARPA premium pay proposal and possible votes.
Still not here? That's a long one, so you might,
How about if we bounce back to that one after Dark Stream? Does that work?
well, Mr. Glitzman, I don't think is here yet. So why don't we,
Go to some of the
Mr.
other
Chairman,
ones.
if you don't mind going to number 9.
Yeah.
All right. Review and approve acceptance of EDA grant and possible votes.
So, under the protocol that the finance director has asked you to follow, we would like an explicit, clean vote on the part of the select board to accept a grant with its terms. That's one vote. And the second would be to authorize the town administrator to sign the acceptance forms and participate in there's training and certification and reporting regimen, and just let us run with it. And then what we'll do is provide you with regular updates on, as we report to the EDA, we'll be reporting to you.
Do you want two separate votes, you think?
I think that keeps it clean for Jean, because Jean needs the paper trail with a certified vote of the select board to accept the grant.
So I'll move that the town accept the Economic Development Administration Water and Sewer Infrastructure Upgrade Project Grant in the amount of $3,313,251.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
And
Matt, on our form here, it says Bob Sullivan as well. Do you want him included in the expenditure question?
Yes, because we're doing belts and suspenders, right? So the system administrator, system manager, acting on behalf of the Water Commission, and me acting on your behalf, between the two of us, we sign everything jointly so that there isn't any doubt that both the Water Commission and the Select Board are on the same page.
So now we need our second motion.
I'll move that we authorize the town administrator to execute any agreements, contracts with respect to the Economic Development Administration grant to the town, and take any other action relating thereto to carry out the intent of the board.
I'll amend that to include
Oh.
Bob Sullivan.
Yes. Thank you.
Otherwise,
Yeah, no, we want to do that.
All right, so the motion's been made and amended. Does anybody wish to
Seconded.
second? And seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Why don't we go on to approve minutes?
Are we just going to gloss over this? I mean, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
So, well, I could do it in my report, but maybe since we're buying time.
Yeah.
Filibuster away.
So it was announced late last week that the long-anticipated Economic Development Administration grant was awarded to the town of Douglas. This is, by their standards, is a very large grant. They're more in the business of $1 million, in between $1 million and $2 million. $3 million is one of the biggest they've given. This is an ARPA-funded program through the Department of Commerce and the Economic Development Administration. Our contract that will be covered by the grant is construction only, so all of the engineering has already been retained and completed by the town. So that now we're just going to, once we have a notice to proceed from the EDA, we will be going out to bid for the sewer line up Gilboa and the new sewer pump station on Gilboa, and a water line from the corner of Main and, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly where Main ends and Northeast Main begins, or whether that's Davis, but you know what I'm talking about, the corner of Main and North.
I think that's northeast.
Oh, yeah, it does turn into Northeast, then down the hill and up to the Uxbridge line. And then the contractor that's building the warehouse in the McIntyre pit will connect the Northeast Main water main to the Gilboa Street water main and form a loop, which will greatly enhance the pressure and flow of water in that part of town. So that is of huge benefit to the developments because it means they can have sufficient pressure and flow to maintain their sprinkler systems at optimal levels without dewatering any other part of the town to do it. They're still going to have some water infrastructure on site to store water. The jockey pump needs something to grab right away when the sprinklers activate, but we should be able to handle significant needs in that part of town going forward. So it's a really big boon for the town. This goes hand in foot together with the $4 million that we've gotten from Mass Works. So we got $3 million for water main improvements, and there's $1 million there to subsidize, to complete gas that will come down Gilboa, up North Street, and terminate at North and Main. That will make that entire part of town fully pad-ready in the economic development meaning of that phrase, which is a flat, open, wide piece of land that's properly zoned and has utility connections, water, sewer, and gas. So there'll be further announcements next week over what that implications of that are for the town, but it's really a huge building block towards a very significant economic development project, not only the ones we have already talked about, but additional ones.
We got every penny we asked for, didn't we?
In this case, yes, we did, so there was no deduction from anything that we asked for.
Good preparation.
Well, having pad-ready sites too is huge
Yeah.
for economic development. I think that's where we had near misses.
Yeah.
Because we weren't quite there yet. So I mean, this,
Not even, exactly.
yeah,
We weren't within hailing distance.
We hoped and dreamed, but we
Yeah.
didn't have.
I
the
tried being nice. So,
You had water up to the Shell station, so there was a there, but, yeah, no, sewer's a big deal,
gas is a huge deal.
and gas is over the top, important to people, so this will now enable, this actually completes the discussion with CRG, so the last couple of meetings, we've been talking about the development agreement, we did the closing that never ended, finally ended. So we are very rapidly moving now towards a building permit, which is, I'm told the plan set is going to be submitted next week for a 1.1 million square foot warehouse in between Gilboa and Northeast Main. And the earthwork will begin almost immediately after the building permit is issued. The good news for the community is that the McIntyre site is already very flat, and it's an on-site balance project. So any material that is needed to build up another part of the site is already on the site, and it's all good material for that. So in terms of leveling the site, there won't be a lot of truck traffic importing material into the site. All of the underground utilities associated with the building can be installed on the existing grade and then covered, right? So when they talk about how ideal can you get for a warehouse project, this is about as crazy ideal as it can get. And then we will see, beginning next spring through fall, the actual concrete and the building go up. So with any hope, knock on wood, that there are no supply chain disruptions or other economic disruptions, the warehouse would join the tax base as quote-unquote new growth December 31st, 2024. So just in the back of your mind, that we are going to have a gap here in terms of the revenue generated by this project. So the sale of the property and the building permit all come in this year. Then there's a year of construction, and it won't join the tax rolls until fiscal '25.
They'll be partial, right? Because
They might be partial. I don't know what the assessor's rules will be on that. We can ask Chris Pupka to give us a briefing on exactly what the thought process would be. I think he can start putting it on the roll so long as the slab is down and that there's some
so we
additional.
may get some earlier.
We might get
Does that
some
push them
earlier.
in 23 then?
No, it would be
Still
24,
24, yeah.
right? Because it would have to be done by December 31st, 2022 to be in 23. So,
That would be speedy construction.
yeah, as fast as these things go up, they don't go up that fast. But just in terms of our budget planning, we have to recognize that we can't engage in annual year-over-year constant spending stream based on the revenue coming in from this building until it actually joins the tax roll. So the one-time free cash boom that will occur, because everything happened after June 30, unfortunately, will have to carry you for 2 years until you're able to put it onto the tax roll. It's still very good news, though.
And we have to make no tax concessions either, which is
Right.
pretty nice.
EDA grants are brutal, the amount of paperwork that we still have to do. So in terms of my signing documents, I'd be signing a contract. We will go through a process, which is basically an outreach meeting, launch, it's a conference call that launches the grant. And then we have a great many things that we have to do for reporting. The one thing that we have to be sure of is federal procurement laws may be more strict than Massachusetts, and so we have to follow them. It is critically important that all of the set-asides for women and minority-owned businesses must be met with a grant. We'd be in trouble with the granting authority. So as we go out in the bidding process, we have to make sure we have proper representation from those groups in the bidding process. So that will be part of our
Will you be
package.
reaching out to somebody to help you with,
Well, I think what we're going to do is put out a general contract, right? It will be a necessary term, so the bidders will have to show proof that they can meet the necessary thresholds. And sometimes these GCs get really creative. There are some rules that they have to follow, but they have to show that they can meet the threshold. So.
very exciting.
Yeah, and people, what does this mean for residents? You'll probably see the sewer work. As soon as we can get sewer pipe's a lot easier to get than water pipe. So the northeast main, water main might be the last thing that people see get done, but we'll be back in the street in Gilboa, on the other side of the street.
Yeah.
Because sewer pipes and water pipes
You
have to
got to
be
pave the other half. now.
distance. Well, yeah, no, it's perfect. So that's why we did curb-to-curb paving job to close this out, because everything's already been torn up. Because of course, gas is going to go right down the middle. So the final close-up and top coat of pavement on Gilboa will be done after all 3 utilities have been installed. So we're not going to be tearing up new pavement to do a utility job.
Will power come in underground, or will it be into the project?
I don't know that we know the answer to that.
Be nice.
Today, I saw the first plan that showed where the power connection is anticipated to be, in the middle of the building, coming up the driveway from northeast Main. So I'm going to assume that for them, they're just, because it's a very amenable site, they're going to bury everything, because they don't want trucks driving around.
Right. Loose wires and storms.
Right. So,
I believe we have everyone here from Darkstream.
but that's the end of that report anyway, so timing is everything, Mr. Chairman.
It's impeccable now. Okay, so we have Darkstream LLC HCA amendment and possible votes, and I believe we have everybody here now from Darkstream.
We do, thank you.
Come on up.
Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, first, let me just say I'm so sorry for being late. Deepest apologies here, first in the career. So I thank you guys for being so generous with your time. But my name is Dan Glissman. I'm an attorney with Prince Lobel Ty here on behalf of Darkstream LLC. The team is right here behind me. We're here to talk tonight with board about a proposed relocation of the cultivation and product manufacturing facility for Darkstream. I provided a brief PowerPoint for the board, and seeing as how I've already wasted so much of everyone's time this evening being late, I'm going to kind of skip some of the basics. I think that most of the members of the board are familiar with the Darkstream team, so I won't get into too much detail, but essentially right now Darkstream currently holds their cultivation and product manufacturing license at 116 Davis Street, and they'd like to relocate those operations, which haven't yet commenced operations, to 286 and 286 Rear Webster Street, which is the site of their sibling company, Flying Goose LLC's proposed retail establishment. So we have, if you flip to, I think, page 8, if you scroll down just a little bit more, some basic information about the company, which I won't go through here. Here is the first shot. What you can see on this page is proposed site plan to the right and a preliminary rendering of the proposed facility to the left. As you can see, the approved sort of retail site to the front of the property at 286, and then this rear lot, which is actually a separate parcel, 286 rear, is where the proposed outdoor cultivation facility would go. And then the product manufacturing operations would also be relocated into the proposed sort of retail strip mall area adjacent to the existing retail establishment. So the next slide, you can see just a slightly more detailed proposal of where the actual grow space might be located. There is a fair amount of wetlands in the rear, so we'll have to be mindful of that, but this is an agricultural use. Otherwise, the actual facility itself is pretty basic. There are several outdoor cultivation facilities in Massachusetts currently. Really, they're just a fenced-in area with cameras covering all the, so that they can see the entire space. Of course, it's limited access, not open to the general public, only open to employees. And again, sufficiently secured up to the state's standards. So that would be what the proposal is here.
Could I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
So if we approve the proposal to move this to Webster Street, what are the plans with your Davis Street facility? Are you abandoning those? And
that's correct. Yeah, we would be relocating the actual provision. So the Davis Street site is provisionally licensed for both the cultivation and product manufacturing. Those licenses would be transferred to 286, and then, of course, the host community agreement would be amended to reflect the new address, essentially.
so there's no future plans for the Davis Street site? You're just kind of walking away?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Oh, makes sense.
So actually, if you go 2 slides down, next one, that's just obviously showing that there's no abutters here. One more slide down, that's a sample of what some outdoor cultivation facilities look like. But actually down here, there is an existing outdoor cultivation facility in Uxbridge, and it's at 290 Millville Road. They've been in operation for over a year now. And we haven't checked in with Uxbridge necessarily to see if there's been any issues, but my understanding is the facility has been up and operational. That particular site actually uses a combination of outdoor, purely outdoor cultivation rows, and they also use hoop houses, which are sort of your traditional agricultural. It's a
Plastic greenhouse.
Exactly, yeah, thank you. Not meant for year-round cultivation, but it's really intended to extend what they call the shoulder season, so that they can start a little earlier and run a little later. And then if you flip to the next slide, this team is also currently operating a outdoor cultivation facility in Coleraine. So we just provided a couple of pictures here of, sort of what the inside, if you will, of the fenced-in area looks like. This is obviously early stages of growth, if you will. But this slide and the next slide are two samples of what the facility would potentially look like. You can see the fencing to the right. It's just standard fencing with, Pete, what do you guys have to do the
Privacy
shielding?
mesh, so
Yeah.
that neighbors can't see into it, so they're not staring at a pot plant.
Speaking of neighbors, what are the abutters, who owns the land around here?
It's, that was actually on the slide a few slides back. It's all Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and then, of course, these folks own the property to the north in front of
DCR
it.
weigh in on this yet?
They've not. I don't know if DCR would be, if we would have to go to DCR, but I can certainly look into that.
DCR is looking to come in and meet with us, and that was one of the topics of conversation. They don't have opposition.
Yeah, I trust the chairman, but I would check that. I understood when we were looking at this lot that we were limited in what we could do because we were adjacent to the state forest. It's probably a perfect spot for it if DCR is cool with it. Great.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll certainly follow up, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, just to ensure that that's in fact the case.
How high is the fence?
8 feet, I believe.
What do you do if somebody wants to dig under the fence? Do you have any security or pick that up, cameras or anything?
There's motion sensors that run along the side of the fence. So if someone gets it within 3 to 4 feet of the fence, it
Yeah.
automatically alerts
Okay.
the alarm company.
So you have to dig 5 feet
10
back.
out.
Yeah.
Correct.
And the cameras as well.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
You better see.
The cameras as well
I
would,
see you taking notes over there.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Odor. Being an outside, is it going to produce a lot of odor?
the facilities themselves, they do produce odor. It's really once a year when they're actually harvesting the plants, if you will. The odor when they're in growth mode is not as strong as once they're fully bloomed and they're cut. So there will be odor, but of course the location here with no butters is ideal from that perspective.
Actually, in a neighboring town in Webster, you're probably about 300 or 400 feet from a campground.
Okay.
So that's why I'm asking that question. So I don't know if this goes through site plan review or whatever at some point, then you most likely have to notify them of the thing. But it's just a question, so.
Are you going to do processing too?
The processing will occur inside the production facility, if you will.
Are you going to make edibles out of it too there, or?
It'll be authorized to make
Yeah.
edibles. I don't know if there's plans yet at the moment to have a commercial kitchen. Typically, they start with pre-rolls and sort of,
Pre-rolls and concentrates, and then make another investment for the commercial kitchen.
Do they make ice cream out of it?
Yes, you can. They have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Without ice cream lady.
does the DOR classify the processing as manufacturing, Department of Revenue?
Department of Revenue. I'm not entirely sure.
Because that.
From a tax perspective?
Comes down on taxing equipment. If it's a non-manufacturing operation, then the town can tax the equipment that's used to produce.
I know there's been some, case rulings, court rulings on cannabis cultivation not being agricultural, and there is in fact a provision in the law that carves out cultivation from agriculture. I'm not entirely sure
The processing,
what the processing side is. I'd have to get back to you and look at that. I don't know.
I know that for fishing, if you do cleanup scallops, for example, and pack them and everything, it's considered manufacturing because you're changing the packaging or the product. So you might
Yeah, we could certainly find out. I mean, there are, hundreds of manufacturing
Yeah.
facilities across the Commonwealth, so I certainly can add that to the list
Yeah.
to check with DCR and DOR. The one other thing that I wanted to bring just to the board's attention, there was some question about whether or not the state would allow multiple uses, cultivation, product manufacturing, and retail sort of within the same compound. So I did go through the list of all the existing currently operating facilities, and there's probably 2 or 3 dozen examples of areas where they have a fully sort of vertically integrated facility, and some of them are medical, which was required to be vertically integrated at the onset, but many of them are also just strictly adult use. So I can share this with the town administrator and make sure that gets distributed to the board, but there's several examples of existing operating sort of fully vertically integrated facilities.
Will this be medical too, or not?
Just adult use. That's correct.
CCC is pretty thorough about looking into what they're going to allow and what they won't. And if you've already got examples that are out there, I mean, ultimately, their authority is who we lean on for guidance anyway. So,
Absolutely.
What are the economics of growing marijuana? Is it cheaper to do it outside?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
A lot cheaper to build, to get the facility up and running. Obviously, you're not, basically creating an outdoor environment inside and having it hermetically sealed so that the air doesn't escape and all that stuff. So it's a lot less expensive to get it operational.
So 1 crop per year, or?
Typically, it depends on,
Possibly 2,
yeah.
back to the shoulder season.
Yeah.
You could start some auto-flowering
Right.
seeds early in the season and grow a quick short plant and get some yield out of it, and then you'll have your full-term product that will go 8 to 10 weeks of total flower time.
that's when you end up with those big monster bushes that you saw in there.
Yeah.
We typically harvest in October, but it depends on the temperature and sun in the environment that you're in. So we call it Croptober. We take down the outdoor plants, and that's when you get a mild odor from the harvest.
And how about water? Seems to be an issue for almost everything these days. Is that you have ample water there, or how much, do they use a lot of water?
Well, we also use rainwater too to water the plants, so we do need to water the plants, but we'll have to drill a well or 2, whatever. Have some detention ponds where we can to try to save some water when it rains. We'll use that as well.
What do we need to do? A new location?
You just approve the amendment to the HCA, reflecting the new location.
Also move that we approve the HCA at the new location presented to the, what's the address again?
286 and 286 rear.
286 Webster and rear.
Correct.
Is there a time crunch to this?
They're not going to be,
Our goal is to get plants in the ground next year.
right, so the next spring season. So of course, we have to go through this process. Unfortunately, the company's already provisionally licensed, so we have to do what's called the change of location process through the CCC. It's significantly quicker, it's administrative, and it kind of gets you right to the inspection process. So we'll have to hold a meeting to do the actual license transfer to the new location, and that typically takes about 4 months from start to finish. So, ideally, the process will be completed by the end of the year, if you will, so that we can be ready to be fully built out prior to the season starting.
Will you wait for that before you go into your design and permitting phase?
No, we work on design simultaneously while we're working on our administrative changes.
Just so you can get through all the board, you have a conversation.
Yeah, we wouldn't start it afterwards, so we would not make the season if that was the case.
No, that's why I was asking
Yeah.
that question.
And we have to do an architectural review process with the state where they kind of verify the security protocols are in place, et cetera. And so we do that typically after we've done any design review with the town and we have a fully developed, program for the site.
All right, so I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I have more questions. Actually, you mentioned the campground. Is there any liability that the town has for smell?
The town would have.
Yeah, I can't say that.
So, if you don't mind, that's why I brought up the planning board and stuff. I think that's going to be handled through the site plan review process, and
When they have a public hearing on it.
they're going to have a public hearing on it, I would imagine, so.
Is that on your radar?
Yeah.
Is it? All right.
Yep.
I'll
It's a
second.
requirement on the commercial property to have a site plan review, so it's not an option for them.
All right, I just didn't want to blindside. So I'll second.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I don't have any questions.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right. Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All set.
Thank you, thank you.
Which bay are we losing? We losing the coffee shop or the pizza shop? Inquiring minds want to know.
Which would you prefer?
What do you prefer?
What had the greatest excise tax revenue potential for
Right,
today?
how about the place?
Probably the pizza.
Was there a car rental business in this?
I've been advocating for tacos from the beginning.
Well, that's the other thing, like, we use pizza as like a placeholder for the
Yeah.
restaurant.
Of course,
But
yeah.
then after like going around town,
Yeah.
there's pizza place, you guys have a lot of pizza places.
Yeah, we do.
You go over to Harrisville on Tuesday and get their business model for the tacos, you'll sell out like crazy.
Quick question.
Sure.
The Davis Street property, did you
Yes.
guys purchase that or were you leasing it?
We were leasing.
Leasing,
Okay.
yeah,
And that's done, taking care of that?
Correct, yes.
yeah. Yeah, we've given notice to the property owner already. Matt, I don't know if you want to take a look at this, I can email you a copy.
It's good to have it now
But,
distributed.
yeah, I'll send it via email so you can distribute easier, but I highlighted all the examples of verticals.
Great.
Thank you all very much. Sorry again, and thank you for your patience.
Yeah, you're good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, take care.
So many places you wonder how big the market is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not saturated yet. It's still got room to grow.
Calls.
Oh, my God, yeah. I mean, half of them, I don't.
All right, so we're on approved minutes and possible votes.
Now you can go back to ARPA.
Good to see you.
Oh, yeah, ARPA. Thank you.
Dan, they'll send it to see
I
you.
put hold on that too, and I should have said after dark stream, there it is. So ARPA premium paid proposal and possible votes.
Thank you very much.
So tonight was the night we were to have a final, and we're not there yet, but we're a long way towards it. So I want to distribute this insanely long memo that we need to do to document for single audit purposes and for compliance purposes what we're thinking and why we're thinking it. And I'm not going to try to go through the whole memo. I'm giving it to you tonight to go over the caption highlights, to tell you what needs to be filled in, and to hopefully in 2 weeks have the completely final product. Working with Tom Zadelis is the consultant that we hired using ARPA funds, so we're not using taxpayer funds to get the consultant, but Tom has been sort of the point man here in Worcester County for ARPA compliance and reporting and making sure that cities and towns are spending money on eligible uses. And for premium pay, there are a number of considerations. And the first one I deal with in the memo is what period are we talking about? And the recommended period is March 10th, 2020, which is the day that Governor Baker declared a state of emergency in the Commonwealth, to the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, 2022. That was pretty much the period in which we worked very hard to staff a second ambulance and to get started with the response. It was also the date at which we started being able to get PPE a little bit more readily, and we started entering orders, and the federal government came through with financial support for the cities and towns through the state. So that it's that first period where we cannot use hindsight to judge the decisions we made at the time. We have to go back to the time. COVID-19 was largely an unknown. It was something that started in China. We saw lots of footage of people being wheeled around in hospitals in China. We understood that the People's Republic was building hospitals, doing these 2-week buildings, throwing up these enormous buildings in just 2 weeks, and they were very concerned about it. When it came here, the early cases that came to the United States, there was very severe sickness and some death associated with early cases. So when we looked at what was going on, all of our planning and other efforts were geared towards a severe pandemic of a very severe disease. It's always better to dial something back than it is to try to ramp it up. So during this early period of time, we engaged in the first page and a half or so is a reminder summary for the board and for the edification of anybody who audits us in the future of all of the specific concrete steps that we took and how we directed employees, in many cases away from their routine daily job description. Under the authority of the Civil Defense Act, we created basically whole new jobs for people. Again, as a reminder to folks, there was a budding community and a number of communities across the Commonwealth where the response to the pandemic was to do layoffs, and they laid off a lot of their municipal personnel so they could collect, get their stimulus payments, and they would be almost where they would have been if they had stayed in their jobs. And town services in many communities were completely shut down. In Douglas, we did not do that. We maintained our service level, and to the extent that people workload was reduced because we were in lockdown, they were reassigned to other essential functions of town government that were pandemic response related. So one of the initial conversations with the collective bargaining units and the leadership of the fire and police departments and Selectman Cortez was to try to get a handle on what the time frame was and to get the agreement of the two major bargaining units that we had identified the proper period. Because we figured that no matter how you look at this, because public safety is 24/7 operation, if we paid premium pay on an hourly basis, the lion's share of it will go to first responders. And that has played out as we've done the analysis. So that is the period that's recommended, March 10th through June 30th, 2020. Then we start getting into the eligibility requirements here on the 4th and 5th pages of the document. Essential activities, and I'll just read the definition that the federal government is using. The final rule requires that workers eligible for premium pay have regular in-person interactions or regular physical handling of items that were also handled by others. This requirement will help encourage use of financial resources for those who have endured the heightened risk of performing essential work. So I took that definition because it's pretty much a bright line rule and applied it across the entire roster of all the town's employees. So what was somebody assigned to during this period, and do they fit the definition? The other bright line rule that was established by the Treasury is that work done from home is absolutely not eligible. So if you were working remotely during this time, those hours that you work remotely, you have, by definition, no interactions with others, and you're not touching the things that you should be concerned about. You're in your own home. So going through this, I establish 3 groups of employees. The first responders are in Group 1. Group 2 includes anyone who is reassigned to a pandemic response activity who meet the definition. So they had regular interactions with other people, they touched items that other people touched. So what we're capturing there, for the most part, are all the employees who are assigned to 2 outreach functions. One, the community food program. So that is the adult social center staff and library staff. And what I have yet to include in my memo is all the school department staff, so the cafeteria workers, and to some extent I did an open question about some of the custodial staff that participated in the preparation of meals every week, it was typically 2 or 3 days of manufacturing meals and delivering them into the community. And the other 2 days of the week were massaging the list of people who were going to get those meals. So it was all activity was related to feeding people. And the library made its services available to people in terms of delivery of materials to their home, just to keep people in a good place mentally and emotionally during the pandemic. The library was delivering books and videos and recorded books to people's homes and collecting them back. So that's group 2. Group 3 is anybody came to town hall and still met the definition. Town hall was closed to the public, and we had pandemic measures, social distancing, masking, other things in place here. We still had people whose daily function required them to interact with the public or to go out to the lockbox, pull out a lot of material. This was sort of the last thing that I researched over this weekend, because my initial inclination was to say, well, that's a little bit tenuous of a connection, but really thinking it through and reviewing some of the ARPA materials and the advice from the consultant really came to the conclusion that you really can't rule those people out. What's the difference between touching a lunch bag and touching lots of mail that people have submitted? If that's the way the regulations are going to define eligible activity, then that's what we need to go with. So with the exception of the school employees, I think I've captured in this memo the analysis for virtually every position, okay, in the budget. And they're presented in the order in which the departments appear in Gene's budget, general ledger. But just because somebody had an eligible activity, there are still another inquiry. And the inquiry has to do with the Biden administration's priorities are that premium pay would go to people, mostly hourly workers, who meet the eligibility definition but are not already well compensated. So people who really came to work out of necessity, they had bills to pay themselves, and that's the priority of the administration. So the caps are, you cannot out of the box include people who are considered exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So if you're not familiar with that body of law, it really divides the world into 2 pieces, management and hourly. Management folks who earn a salary are not eligible for overtime, and they exercise managerial authority. They are not immediately eligible for premium pay. If you want to take an exempt employee and justify giving them premium pay, you have to write a narrative. You basically need findings of fact that support the notion that they were involved. The other part of it is an income cap. So this is where it gets really like down in the weeds, right? The Bureau of Labor Statistics for every state and every metropolitan statistical area tracks wages and employment levels. And so they published a statistic called the average wage for all occupations. And we would use, because the higher of the two, the higher of Commonwealth versus Worcester Metropolitan is Commonwealth. So you take the higher statistic, and that statistic comes out to, it's 150% of the average wage for all professions in the state. In May 2020, the average wage for all occupations in the Commonwealth was $33.66, with an annual mean wage was $70,010. So therefore, 150% of the rate is $50.49. The annualized mean is $105,015. So we cannot, out of the box, give premium pay to anyone who meets those, who's above those caps. And we also, if somebody is eligible, they're beneath the cap, you can't take them above the cap with the premium pay. So we might set an hourly rate for premium pay, but if we have somebody who's pretty close to the 50-49,
50 cents under it, you get 50 cents.
you get up to that and then you stop. And that really isn't going to apply for too many people. Out of the box, I can think the rate that's paid to the deputy chief of the fire and ambulance department is relatively close to 50, and we might have some fire lieutenants and police sergeants that, if they're they're long on the tooth and they're getting that bump for longevity, they might get close to it. So whatever we do in the final analysis, we have to stop at $50.49 as an hourly rate.
And this covers employees that have already left employment in the town.
So they had to be working here in 2020, but if they've left, we still would owe them because it's money they earned while they were here.
You've had a change in the cafeteria staff.
There's been changed cafeteria we've had. So when we start to get into the specific names, you'll recognize one lieutenant that was in the fire department that put in a lot of hours. It no longer works here. A couple of paramedics that used to put in a lot of hours don't work here anymore either.
Do we have a specific sum that's already been allocated to us?
So,
And now we're
No.
backfill? No, okay,
so your ARPA budget is 2.7 million.
yeah.
My recommended approach to the board is that you say how much of the 2.7 million you want to use for premium pay. Because when you do that, then the allocation table just comes out by hours. If you set an hourly rate that you want to pay, then you multiply it times the number of hours, that's a different way of doing the budget, right? So that might have a higher upside potential. So for purposes of understanding the scope, the end of my memo, the part that I'm still working on, you can see I have a list of employees by name that have been deemed eligible, and we've done most of the research involved in how many hours. So group one is done. There isn't going to be any change to group one, so that's fire, police, and the public health nurse who, for purposes of the emergency response, was a direct responder. So everything she did in terms of going to people's homes, checking on quarantines, contact tracing, all of that is pandemic response. Those hours add up to 15,322 and 3/4 hours. With, you can see the names that are associated. Clearly, fire department staff that work 24-hour shifts are going to have higher hour totals. The consultant's advice is, since you never know when a call is coming in, you pay premium pay for the hours worked, because you can't use historical 2020 hindsight to score only call time. It's when they came to work, they were on call to respond to anything while they were on shift. So that is the threshold that we're using. So just recall, police officers work 8-hour shifts, firefighters work 24-hour shifts with a 56-hour a week, where the police are at 40. So that's why you see this change. You know, there's a lot more hours in the fire department than police. I think it's important to point out at this point that when you apply all the factors, most of the senior management of the town is not eligible at all. So this conversation does not include town administrator, finance director, highway superintendent, in his role as highway superintendent, the chief of police. Those roles didn't require, they blow through the eligibility requirements on many levels, and therefore those employees are not eligible for premium pay of any kind. The exception is fire and ambulance, where the chief actively, as a paramedic, went to calls, and he also went to fire calls. In fact, when most of the department got sick, it was directly related to either the fire in Whitensville or repairs that were done to fire equipment where people were sitting together and drove off to. So we really think that that fire in Whitensville is probably the night when a lot of people contracted COVID. When you look at the hours, it's just not that many anyway. So it's not the most impactful designation. So when I went through it and I found exempt employees, I've written the narrative. My primary concern is the Adult Social Center director and...
I need to excuse myself.
Sure. And the library director, who technically are management employees and therefore they're exempt for FLSA purposes. But their annual salaries are well below 150% of all occupations. And because of their activities, what they did during these 4 months qualified them. We are going to write the narrative to justify premium pay. So for fire chief, Ms. Russo, Mr. Snook, and here in Town Hall, some of the Group 3 employees are technically exempt, but they met all the other qualifications. So the town treasurer, the assistant collector, those roles. So on Group 2, we've been able to run the payroll records, and we have established the maximum. So the maximum number of hours for Group 2, without including the school department personnel yet, is about 3,333 and a half hours. And Group 3, I started working on this evening, is just eyeballing it, is going to be about that same amount. So for the sake of estimation only, you're probably going to be looking around 22,000 hours. And if you paid $10 an hour, that's $220,000 of ARPA money. That's roughly the universe we're talking about. If you start pushing past $10 an hour, let's say you went to $12.50, there are caps of what an individual can get for premium pay, and then you also run against that hourly rate cap. So even if you gave a higher rate, you may not grow it all the way to another 25% because you're going to have some people drop off because they're capped.
So you're saying it's going to be around 220, 230?
Between 220 and 250, I'd say it's pretty much what you're looking at
So
here.
that comes out of the original ARPA funds?
Yes.
And then the balance, just to refresh my memory, the balance of those funds after we do this?
So, thank you, Selectmen. There have been some very small expenditures of ARPA money that's authorized by this board, but I don't even think it totals 100,000. So you're still going to have close to $2.5 million left for the other projects that have applied to you for consideration.
Those being,
For the sake of argument, let's call it 2.4.
that's the economic development, bring some money in there, right?
You encumbered it,
Yeah.
but then we didn't use
Need
it.
it, okay.
So I should probably also point that out. So this board did encumber ARPA funds as a potential match for MassWorks,
Yeah,
and we have not had to use that. So when the EDA grant came in, it alleviated, and the extra MassWorks, there's $1 million that came in extra, so the MassWorks grant that we're working with, we were awarded $3 million, but there was another award of $1 million, so we're at $4 million. The private parties that have already volunteered funds, they actually saw their contribution amount go down,
yeah.
but they still cover a whole gap. So we will not be using those ARPA funds that you encumbered for that purpose.
So what does that leave us to use with the balance?
I still think it's right around 2.4. It's
And
just
that would
not a
be,
lot.
what projects?
Taken
maybe?
away.
We discussed where other uses?
So they've all been submitted to you in a list. So we have water projects, we've got telephone and security
Okay,
projects,
all right.
if you recall those conversations. I know the chairman wants to submit a request for senior transportation to join to that list. So that's what is still out there for you to consider. But you had voted to direct me to prepare this first. So that's pretty much where I'm at. I got to get this off my plate, so I want to give this to you before the end of the week.
Yeah,
I was thinking that too, Hal.
yeah.
Right, I mean, we can send you, we can kill a day just by
Yeah.
this memo itself. I think $250,000 is more than ample, and that would cover it. If you want, I'll make a motion that we approve up to $250,000 for the ARPA premium pay program presented tonight.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So what you'll get in 2 weeks then is the final, right? Employee name, number. And then we'll vote that, you guys can vote that, and then direct me to go through channels to see that it's paid out, and it'll be paid out.
All this additional money is subject to withholding and everything, that's no different.
Oh, yeah, all that stuff's going to apply. Yep.
Sam wants his share.
Yeah, Uncle Sam's going to take some of his money back.
Yeah.
I said I'm giving you $1, I meant 70 cents.
Right. It's the world we live in.
Nice job, Matt.
Thank you for your patience. This ended up being a little bit more of a lift than I originally anticipated.
And there's no threat at this point that they do it was a final rule, but we're going to revisit the final rule.
God, I hope not, right?
All right. Is there any value? I know there's people that aren't employed with the town that we're going to have to chase anyway. Is there value in getting this thing queued up but not releasing the funds until other towns have done it and we wait and see?
To be honest, I think we're late to the game. So I know a lot of towns the towns that are going to do this, many of them have already completed it. And the Commonwealth, so Governor Baker's already released, what they did in the Commonwealth was gave everybody a flat sum. So if you were eligible, you got $3,000, period. That's all the inquiry they did. And their original payment out, I spend way too much time in the courthouse with DCF workers, but there was some grousing because some folks who regularly went to court and regularly were involved in various DCF activities didn't get a payment. And so I think there was some blowback in the state about the definitions of what counted as public contact. And then eventually, all those additional payments were made to those people. So that was 5 months ago. Yeah. Some of our folks are going to be well north of 3,000. I thought, just to wrap this up, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to delay it any longer, but an hourly basis was more fair than a flat, here you go. Because, let's say, I have people on this list who did eligible work for the town and may have put in 5 hours, 45 hours. You want to give them the same amount of money you give somebody who put in 1,000 hours? That's not even close.
For 8 hours and then another one for 1,000.
So it needed to be broken down. And then you can't discount those people, though, who did give you those 40 hours, because they may have been very important 40 hours.
Correct.
So the fairest way is you're compensated for the amount of effort you put in, the amount of time you put in.
Yeah, and it's relatively blind for us. I mean, I know we could do the math that it's presented here, but it's not like we're picking and choosing who's the winner and the loser.
Right.
It's something like that.
So
Good.
I thank you for the vote, and that'll get us to a final by your next meeting.
Excellent. Okay, approved minutes and possible votes.
Lisa, is it just the one today?
Yes.
Make a motion that we approve the July 5th minutes and retain them all,
Executive.
executive session minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Your report, Mr. Administrator.
Fortunately, a lot of it's done to you already. So we've gone over EDA and we've gone over ARPA. Those are the two major activity sets. We are out to bid now, and we have a low bidder on one project that's already been closed. So to just go over it, we're out to bid for pavement projects. So these are all the roadways you've already discussed. That period will close on August 10th, so that is the day we'll open pavement bids. I know that there are still plan holders pulling documents, so as of today, I know there was an additional one. I know we have competition already, so we have, in terms of what we've seen posted, there are 3 very highly regarded, well-recognized pavement companies that have pulled the package. So I'm anticipating that would probably double, and we'll have a good, robust bid. We closed the bidding process for the day tank here and selected a low bidder who very promptly came to Town Hall this morning with a measuring tape and determined that the engineer's specifications are a physical impossibility. We're not going to reissue. We're just going to take the specification and change it and stick with it. The difference between the bidders was significant. The most of the design will remain, but the day tank will be smaller so that it will fit through the door and get installed. So I will never be the guy who will say just because an engineer touched something, it must be right, because unfortunately, that wasn't the case here. But that is within budget. Just so you know, when we're closing out the town meeting appropriation for the remediation of the basement, we need to close out all the activity that was done by the prior environmental consultant. We need to pay the current environmental consultant for the closeout, and then we need to finish the day tank replacement so that we can run the heating plant here in the winter without having Adam come here and manually do things. The new system will be fully alarmed, and there'll be a building alarm as well as some connection to Adam's phone, so he can see what's going on here, and he'll be notified when there's an alarm immediately when the alarm goes off, which is different from what we had in place. We had to wait until somebody smelled it and called. So if that comes in the mid-70s, that leaves about 20-some-odd thousand for the environmental consultant to finish his work, which he thinks he can do. So knock on wood, the hope is we will close out this entire oil spill fiasco with the money that town meeting already gave us. I think all I would say is, by way of caveat, is we might still have to go back to town meeting, but for a small, very, very small sum. But right now, the goal is to not go back. The gym windows project failed its first inspection today, but it was only a cosmetic issue. They're going to come back and finish some caulking. But the windows are beautiful. The workmanship seems to be pretty solid. The shades is the one thing that we're waiting for. There's a supply chain issue with them. So the contractor will come back one more time. We will not close out the contract until the shades are installed and they are all operable the way they're supposed to be. But I think that they have improved the appearance of the building. I think that makes the building look cleaner.
You don't need lights on there.
And modern. You don't need lights in there at all during the day. The shades, though, are going to be, they're not blackout shades, but they're going to really change the light levels a lot. So people using the court will be able to open and close them. So that project is done. The next item I wanted to cover, in addition to procurements, we will be going out to bid, by the way, for fuel oil. We are going to fully implement the fuel card system so that we are, to the extent that our vehicles are going to be fueling up at retail locations, they're going to use a card that automatically removes those taxes that the town shouldn't pay because we're a tax-exempt entity. So we should be saving some money.
Federal and state.
Both
right?
federal and state. I think there's one tax that we have to collect. I think that's the underground storage tank tax that has to be collected regardless of the user. But we'll be taking a lot of the expense out of our fuel costs because we won't be paying the taxes anymore. And that is a procurement activity. We're using Sourcewell, and they use WEX as the transaction clearing bank. The town website, I just wanted to update people. We're aware that we have to catch up on the posting of minutes. Good catch by some of our residents. It's a little bit aggravating that it's so difficult to manipulate documents in our existing website suite. So what I'm trying to explain to people is we have an early template from Civics Plus. Civic Plus has actually pretty much taken over the Massachusetts market. Almost all municipal websites are Civic Plus. I investigated changing over to another company. The listserv for my national association just happened. I didn't initiate this, but somebody else was looking for a website provider, and the company that I thought I wanted to entertain. Awesome sales demo. You implement their website, it's worse than anything you've ever used before. So we dodged a bullet by not thinking that we were going to do better. The town of Sutton has a wonderful website. It's extremely functional, it's very elegant. You're never more than a couple clicks away from something you're looking for, and it's a Civic Plus website. So we've been reaching out to them through Lisa and others to determine, is it a more recent template than ours, or did they just organize their work differently? We also had the issue here in terms of some turnover in the note-taker position. After Mary Wright left, we had an interim that only stayed for a little while and got a little bit overwhelmed. Our current note-takers are doing a wonderful job, and we had staff turnover too. So Suzanne left and Lisa came, Maria retired and Jen came. So some of our major boards were still catching up. For the select board and the planning board, this year and most of last year are up, so on the website. But Finance Committee is the one I really want to catch up on. But if the residents will just bear with us while we work through this, we'll get it all done. The last thing I want to bring the board's attention to is we had an extraordinary positive result this year in our group health insurance. So the typical year, the goal is when you're self-insured, you put enough money into your self-insurance fund and you spend about 89% of what you put in just on medical claims. So 89, 90% is roughly the loss ratio you're looking for from a strong plan. So a plan that doesn't have a lot of huge claims in 1 year. And then you're going to load somewhere between 8 and 9% in expenses. So your consulting fees, your vendors, other relationships, your treasurer, your accountant, your auditor, all of those things should add up between 8 and 9%. So every year, the town and the employees contribute a sum, call it $100. We should be spending 98 of that in a healthy year and taking $2 and just throwing it into surplus and letting that build over time as a rate stabilization fund. Well, this year, of the $100, we spent 63, all in. So we have a 37% surplus for the last fiscal year. And that is a result mostly of some changes in our claims pattern. I would definitely not say that this will happen again anytime in the near future. But what it means is that we already had a healthy surplus in the rate stabilization fund with the group. So this year we added $566,000 to that. So really rounding up $567,000. So we are now, by the bylaws of the purchase group, must take money out of our reserve and bring it back to the town. And there will be a future agenda item for this board to determine what to use those funds for. Just by way of report, you may recall that when we started the group, we needed to put money in. The three founding members, Dudley Charlton and Webster and Douglas, put money in, not knowing what our initial claims experience would be and whether we would have sufficient funds in the first couple of months to cover all the claims. And that was a little over $200,000. It's called the equity buy-in. We created equity in the trust fund so we could pay claims and other expenses. Well, that came out of free cash. Now that we have a surplus in the reserve fund, we should pay the town back and put that $200,000 back into free cash. I think Gene and I feel very strongly that that's the recommendation. What you do from there is largely going to be something that you have to decide and propose, remember, to your union members and your employees. So there are different things. Probably the biggest eyesore we have on our balance sheet is our OPEB liability is a very large number, and we've only put a little over $1 million towards it. So when we go for bond ratings, the bond rating agencies look at it and say, well, your unfunded liability is over $20 million, and you've put about $1 million away against it. So we may want to look at OPEB funding as being a priority. The other options you would have are, you could pick up more of the HSA. So right now the deductible's $3,000. The town gives everybody $1,500 in an HSA. To cover their deductible, you might give them all $3,000 for a year. But they're just reminding people that that is untaxed compensation. It's a tax benefit program. The IRS treats it as pre-tax, and you don't get taxed until you take it out.
Do we have to bargain that?
I don't know that you have to bargain the HSA, but if you do anything with plan design or premium rate, you would. So, lots of food for thought there. So, you are now,
We could have a bad year in the future where.
so, right,
Some of
so
that money be kept as a reserve to go in.
you got to leave it in, because we're a small group, right? So we're going to be more volatile than the other members in the group.
So we'll leave a good.
The maximum allowed is 8%, or is it 12? But the target is to be between 8 and 12%, and not go above that.
What's the dollar amount of money? Roughly.
So 8% would be about 1 month of claims, and that's about $200,000.
So you're talking about 150,000. 200 goes back to free cash, 200 reserve.
Just bear in mind, our total surplus right now is about 1.1 million. And we also have a share of the pharmacy rebate fund that we have not allocated to the 3 towns yet. That fund is up to 1.4 million. So it's a pretty hefty sum.
So
That
you're
would,
already set up.
yeah.
I was talking with Chairman Hughes earlier, maybe it was late last week. We talked about the OPEB, and when we started, it just tells you I've been on this board too long, $50,000.
Right.
And we didn't have the 50,000 to put in, and now we're up over $1 million, so it's 19 more to go, but we got there.
Look how much we've saved with this program over the, 3 years?
Yep. And it continues to grow. We have 3 towns clamoring to get in, oh, actually, a city and 2 towns clamoring to get in now, so.
More the better, right? I would assume.
Yeah, so the only piece of bad news, and I think I told you this already, is that the rates in the reinsurance market are up by a lot. The good news is it's not a big part of our spend. So about 6% of the fund is spent every year on reinsurance. So reinsurance kicks in when you have claims that are so big
Yeah.
that they come in and they pay. Basically, the insurance company buys insurance against, so our exposure is from the deductible, $3,000, to the capitation, which is $150. Claims over $150 are paid by reinsurance. Well, the marketplace had, the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts had a rough year. So really, reinsurance rates are going up by a ton. And some funds are looking at 25% increase in their reinsurance rates. We're going to beat that because we have market power now, because we have so many covered lives that we have more negotiating power. So even today, as we sit here now, we are the 4th largest Medicare Advantage group in Massachusetts, and right around the 6th biggest purchasing group. If those parties that are interested in joining us, the city of Salem, town of Sturbridge, town of Sudbury, if they come in and we identify a few more targets, in terms of our retiree population, we may end up being one of the largest Medicare Advantage groups in the state. Actually, I have misspoken. We are already the largest Medicare Advantage group, and we are the 4th largest purchasing group. Sorry, I misspoke. Medicare Advantage is a specific form of retiree insurance. And when the city of Fall River joined us, we just blew everybody away. We're just way bigger. Because Boston doesn't offer an Advantage plan.
Overall, we're looking pretty good financially, it seems to me.
Things are coming along. You got to hope everything stays stable and that the market doesn't kill us, but so far. And keep your ears open for a big announcement next week, because we're not done with economic development. We have a very significant announcement coming next week. Okay? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. That concludes my report.
Excellent. All right, so we're at open session topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and I see 2. Employees Insurance Advisory Committee appointment of Holly Cotnoir, impossible votes.
So the EIAC is the board where we talk about the health insurance benefit, each bargaining unit gets a member, then the non-union employees get a rep. It's very important that the reps be kept current. First of all, I need to make a quorum when I need a group. And secondly, there has to be someone that people can go to ask questions. Since we're talking about this tonight, what to do with these funds, the vacancy here is created because Beth McKay retired and is no longer eligible to be an active employee representative. So the assistant treasurer, we wanted to get this done quickly because we want the board to have a quorum when it meets.
Is this limited to health insurance, or do they do liability, any?
No, just health. And the voluntary programs, life and dental.
Make a motion that we appoint Holly to the Employees Insurance Advisory Committee appointment.
Second.
It's all right. Motion's been made and seconded.
I've seen that on the teleprompter get repeated.
Yeah, right. Let me shake your hand.
Ouch.
Any further discussion?
No.
Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, authorize
Yeah, that's assumed.
Authorize the town administrator to sign on behalf of Selectmen for sewer asset management project documents and possible votes.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.